My mother forgot to make me a plate at Christmas. She said there wasn't enough food, though my brother's girlfriend got seconds. I didn't say anything. I just stood up, took the dish I had brought, and left. They called me rude. I didn't make a scene. I just didn't expect Christmas to go smoothly. I've long stopped expecting normal from my family, but this time, they truly surprised me, not with kindness or warmth, but with something colder than the weather outside. We had driven 3 hours through sleet and traffic. My boys, 7 and 9, were excited in the back seat, not yet realizing that family doesn't always mean what it should. I had a headache before we even arrived, but I kept telling myself to endure it. A few hours, a few polite laughs, eat, then leave. When we pulled up, no one came out to greet us, not even a wave from the window. Inside, the dining room was already full. Everyone was seated like we were late, even though we were right on time. My mother gave me that short, tight smile that never reaches her eyes, then turned back to her wine. My brother Jeff was there with his new girlfriend Lana. He'd known her for barely a month, yet she was already treated like family. She sat next to Mom, chatting like she owned the place. My boys and I were seated at the far end of the table. No decorations, no place cards, not even napkins. Dinner started being passed around. My kids got plates. Everyone got plates. Then silence. I kept waiting for mine, watching as the dishes grew lighter and lighter. Then Mom walked past me with a smirk and said, "Loud enough for everyone to hear." There wasn't enough for everyone. "I figured you wouldn't mind, Emily." My sons looked at me, confused. Honestly, I didn't understand it either. I just stared at her. She didn't stop, just poured herself another drink. I tried to stay calm. I told myself maybe it was a mistake, maybe they forgot. But then Lana, in her shiny dress and loud laugh, stood up for seconds. Seconds. My mother even helped her scoop more potatoes, like it was nothing. That was it. I stood up, walked to the kitchen where Lana had set down her plate to grab a drink, picked it up without saying a word, and walked back through the dining room. The room went silent. Mom looked at me as if I'd committed some offense. Jeff mumbled something. Lana looked lost. I didn't care. My sons stood too, still holding their half-eaten plates. They didn't ask, they just followed. I didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't slam the door. We got in the car. I buckled them in and drove off. 5 minutes later, the phone started buzzing, calls from Mom, then a text from Jeff. "Real mature, Emily. Way to ruin Christmas." I didn't reply. I didn't look back. What they didn't know was that this wasn't just about one night. It was the last night. They called me rude, but they were about to learn what rude really means. The drive home was quiet. My boys whispered to each other in the back, probably unsure if we were in trouble or if something bad had happened. I didn't speak until we got home. I made them cocoa, turned on a movie, and let them fall asleep on the couch. Sitting there in the dark, I realized it wasn't just about the plate. It was about every plate before it. Every insult delivered with a smile. Every holiday where I brought gifts, food, and patience, only to be met with gossip and silence. For 2 years, I'd been paying their bills. When Dad had his heart issue and Mom stopped working, it was my card they used for groceries, gas, medicine, even random online purchases that had nothing to do with necessities. I never complained. I thought I was doing the right thing, but they never thanked me, not once. So the next morning, I made 2 calls. First to the bank. I canceled the card they'd been using and moved all automatic payments to a new one. Then I sent a short, polite text. "Please stop using the card. It's closed. I'll be managing my own finances from now on." That was it. 43 minutes later, the first call came in. I didn't answer. Mom left a voicemail, no apology, just a long passive-aggressive lecture about how disappointed she was and how I'd overreacted. Dad sent a text, "What's going on with the card? We can't get groceries." I stared at it, then deleted it. Soon after, more messages poured in. Lana, my aunt, even cousins I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly had opinions. The family group chat, which usually forgot I existed, unless they needed money, was now filled with fake concern and snide remarks. I didn't respond to any of it, not because I lacked words, but because they didn't deserve them. That night, I sat on the floor with my boys, eating grilled cheese while they built Legos. For the first time in years, I felt light, not exactly happy, but free. And I knew this was only step one. The real message was still coming. 3 days passed without a word from me. I didn't block them or respond. I just existed like they didn't. Apparently, that scared them more than yelling ever could. On the 4th day, there was a knock at my door. I knew it was them before I even looked. My parents never visited unless they wanted something. They stood on my porch with stiff smiles and a bag of cheap cookies. I opened the door just enough to be civil. My sons were watching from the couch. I didn't want them to hear, but I also wasn't hiding anymore. Mom spoke first, using that fake sweet tone she saves for manipulation. She said they were worried about me, that they didn't understand what had happened, that I must be going through something. I told her she was right. I was going through something. Clarity. Dad tried to smooth things over, saying the Christmas dinner was an accident, that they thought I'd already eaten. I reminded him that I drove 3 hours with 2 kids and wasn't even offered a seat. He didn't reply. Then Mom said something that explained everything. We just thought you could handle it. You zip always been the strong one. That was their excuse. Because I was strong, I didn't need kindness. I didn't need food. I didn't deserve basic decency. In their minds, that somehow justified it all. I told them I was done, not just financially, but emotionally. I wasn't going to play the role anymore. Not the generous daughter, not the quiet scapegoat, not the emotional punching bag who showed up out of duty. I told them they weren't welcome in my home and couldn't see my sons until they learned to respect me. They didn't yell or cry. They just stood there, stunned. I closed the door. That night, I expected to feel guilt. Instead, I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I found an envelope taped to my front door. No name, no stamp. Inside was a 4-page letter from my mother. Rambling, manipulative, full of half-hearted apologies and guilt. She even mentioned how hard things were since I cut them off. I didn't finish it. I tore it in half and threw it away. But the pressure wasn't over. It was just beginning. People like them don't give up easily. Not when they're losing control of something they took for granted. The first few days after cutting them off were quiet. Too quiet. No calls. No messages. Just an unnatural silence that felt more like a setup than peace. I didn't trust it. My parents never let things go. Not when their pride was hurt. Silence usually meant they were planning something. I focused on normal life. Took the boys sledding, cooked, cleaned out the garage, tried to move on. Then, just when I began to think maybe they were done, it happened. One Thursday afternoon, I picked up my sons from school. My youngest was excitedly talking about an art project, but my oldest handed me a folded note. He said a woman, a friend of Grandma's, had given it to him. The paper was wrinkled, like it had been crumpled and then flattened. Inside was a printed screenshot of my bank statement from 2 months ago. My personal account, the one they used to access. Several charges were circled. A $146 grocery bill in their town, 3 pharmacy charges, and a hotel booking in Cape May. At the bottom, handwritten in red ink, "So, you've always been keeping score." At first I didn't understand. Then it hit me. Jeff, years ago I'd given him temporary access to my banking app when helping him pay for Mom's medication. I never changed the password. Apparently, he'd kept it. I rushed home, locked the doors, changed every password, then called the bank. They confirmed there had been logins from Nevada, where Jeff and Lana had moved months earlier. I was still trying to absorb that when another shock came. That evening, a delivery driver left a box on my porch. No name, no note. Inside were two things: a half-used roll of duct tape and my son's stuffed bear, the one he'd lost at my parents' house last summer. That's when I called the police, not because of the bear, but because it had turned personal. I showed them the note, the printed statement, and gave them Jeff's name. They advised me to install more cameras and keep records of everything. The next night, we came home from a movie and found the word ungrateful spray painted across my garage door in red. I got the boys inside safely and checked the camera footage. It was grainy, but I could make out a hooded figure, and the car parked down the street had a visible plate number, Lana's. I didn't cry or panic. I made hot chocolate, put the boys to bed, and sat by the window. That wasn't random vandalism. It was a message. They weren't trying to win me back. They were trying to break me. But they forgot. I've spent years cleaning up their messes, swallowing insults, and paying their bills. They had no idea who they were dealing with now. The next morning, I called a locksmith and changed every lock in the house. I had new security cameras installed inside and out. Then, while my boys were at school, I burned the stuffed bear in a metal bucket in the backyard. No satisfaction, just clarity. The old me would have tried to talk it out, find compromise. That version of me no longer existed. Then I started planning. I gathered every receipt, every transaction, every withdrawal they'd made from my account over 2 years. I compiled it into a detailed PDF, page after page of evidence. I added photos of the vandalism, the package, the statement. Then I sent it to every relative who had ever gossiped about me, every mutual friend, and even the church my mother volunteered at. The email subject line read, "Since they want to keep score, let's do it properly." Within an hour, my phone blew up. My aunt called in tears, saying she had no idea. A cousin sent me a screenshot of Mom's Facebook post, some vague complaint about being betrayed by family. But the comments weren't what she expected. People were turning against her. The truth was finally visible. Still, I wasn't done. I knew the only thing they valued was money, so I updated every company tied to my old card, except one, their internet provider. 2 days later I got the call. "Emily, we can't log into our account. We need your help." I didn't answer. I forwarded the voicemail to my lawyer. Then I called their landlord, explained that my parents had been listing me as a financial guarantor without permission, and that all automatic payments from my card were canceled. He understood and said he'd contact them directly. That evening, Jeff called. I ignored it. Then Lana. Finally, Mom's voice message came. Soft, measured, pleading. "Please, Emily. We don't know what to do." For a moment, guilt flickered. But then I remembered Christmas night, my son's confusion, the spray paint, the bear. I texted back once. "You said I was strong. So be strong. Figure it out." Then I blocked every number and changed mine the next day. I knew it might not end there. People like them don't stop when you close the door. They just pound harder. But this time, the door wasn't just shut. It was gone. A month passed. No calls, no packages, no notes, just silence. Real silence. The kind that feels different, almost peaceful. I kept expecting another stunt, but nothing came. Until one night, when I checked the cameras before bed and saw something new. A cardboard sign on the sidewalk under the streetlight. I went out and picked it up. It read, "We're sorry. Please let us explain." No names, no threats, just that. I threw it away. Days later, a letter showed up at my workplace. Not my house, my job. It was from my father. A real apology this time. He admitted they had used me, that he hadn't realized how far things had gone until Jeff crossed the line. He said Mom wasn't well, and that they were desperate. Desperate. That word stayed with me. I didn't feel anger or pity, just finality. Still, one detail bothered me. That Cape May hotel charge. I checked it again, called the hotel, and requested the receipt. It wasn't for my parents. It was for Jeff and Lana. A romantic weekend I unknowingly paid for, while I stayed up nursing 2 sick kids through the flu. That was the final thread. I printed everything again. This time, I mailed it to Jeff's employer, his landlord Lana's parents, and even her in-laws. Then I took the full file to an attorney. I wasn't looking for revenge anymore. I just wanted protection. Together we drafted cease and desist letters for both Jeff and my parents. I signed them calmly, without apology. That night, I hugged my sons a little tighter. My youngest asked if Grandma and Grandpa were coming back. I told him no. He smiled. Not from hate, but because he knew I was finally free. Sometimes, the hardest part of breaking away isn't escaping. It's realizing you could have left long ago. But once you do, there's no going back. Months passed. Winter melted into a damp spring. The quiet settled into something like peace. Then, one day, a letter arrived, postmarked from a small town in Oregon. No return address. Inside was a photo. My parents standing behind a folding table, under a sign that read "Community Donations Welcome." They looked older, tired, maybe changed. Later, another envelope appeared on my car windshield. A check signed in my father's handwriting. No note, no words, just a gesture. I didn't cash it. I didn't destroy it either. I placed it in a drawer beside the photo, not as keepsakes, but reminders. Because the past has a way of resurfacing, and if it ever does again, I'll be ready, not just stronger, prepared.